Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to Wayne State College. My name is Dr. Randy Bertolis, and today I'm here to introduce your next speaker, Connor Semin. Connor Semin is from David City, Nebraska. He's a lifelong Nebraskan. He participates in many clubs, organizations, and activities. Mr. President, as you know, he's one of the first to arrive and the last to leave whenever we need help with a variety of organizational events. He's what my wife would call, and my wife worked many years in the elementary school in town, so she knows. She's what my wife would call a good boy. Today, he's going to talk to you about Benedict Arnold, and if you think you know everything about Benedict Arnold, maybe you don't, maybe you'll learn something new. So draw an eye and listen clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Connor Semin.
I guess I could start off by saying thank you for Dr. Bertolis' kind words and his wife's kind words. Thank you all for being here. I wouldn't be here without the great community here at Wayne State. For everything I put in, Wayne State has given me so much back. So I appreciate you all being here, even if it is just for bonus points. So this did not start as Benedict Arnold. It was originally a much more wide-scoping presentation about counter-espionage and espionage in American history. That is way too broad for an honors project, so I had to continually shrink it down. I was in colonial history with Dr. Eden and was reading about the Revolutionary War. As I got through that, I read a book by John Magee, and it was about George Washington and his spy ring. Guess who's a spy? Benedict Arnold. And this goes down to what I actually wanted to talk about. Narrowed it again. Benedict Arnold, a victim of opportunity, and most of all, a traitor. So, the writing process about this. I used a lot of scholarly books. Now, it has a basis of pamphlets, journals, and all this. Read a lot. But I used three main books. And the main three is John Solik's Spying in America. Fancy little title. There's a chapter in there about Mr. Benedict, as well as other ones around the Revolutionary War. Same thing with Kenneth Daglish, Spies, Patriots, and Traitors. This one more heavily focused on information. However, this is a fun thing for everyone doing an honors project. They constantly cited the last book, Use Your Other Resources. Carl Van Doren's Secret History of the American Revolution was a great resource that I found because I looked in the back of the references of those two other books. With these three books, I cited them constantly throughout my paper, and now I have a presentation about it. So, who is Benedict Arnold? If it would click. There you go. Benedict Arnold is kind of a famous person. He's a notorious traitor. He's innocent. He's also in Scooby-Doo. But this is Benedict Arnold. That shows how far-reaching he is, how known he is. And most of all, everyone knows him as a traitor. But I would like to make a case that he's a victim of his own circumstances and opportunities. But to really understand that, you have to understand the man himself, his early life. Now, this is his childhood home in Connecticut. He was born in Connecticut in 1741. It's a pretty nice house back then. That's a large house. However, he didn't really struggle throughout financial times. His mother came from a wealthy family. His father had a successful business. However, he had different struggles. 3 of his 4 siblings would die of yellow fever, which would cause his father, to become an alcoholic. He would later drink away his fortune, as well as drink away his business and kill it overall. This would leave Benedict Arnold pretty much as the leader of his family, with a chip on his shoulder and large expectations. He would try to start his own business and move on to join the French and Indian War. He would serve there and actually do well. However, when he came back, his mother would die of yellow fever, and later, 2 years later, his father would die of alcoholism. This left him as the patriarch of the family with his younger sister Hannah at the ripe age of 20. Putting huge expectations on him just as a man. So he tries to make those expectations the best he can. He makes his own business. He starts as an apothecary, which is a fancy way of saying he makes medicines. Not a doctor. But it doesn't really go well. British taxes get in the way. It's kind of hard to make a business when they're constantly taxing. So, to get around this, he just starts stealing the things into America. And he makes money off that. He starts smuggling goods, building a fleet. He eventually gets joined into the Sons of Liberty. And the important thing about Benedict Arnold, he starts as a hero. He starts as a revolutionary hero who has morals. He then marries a woman named Margaret Mansfield and has 3 children. Margaret was actually the daughter of the sheriff, so I don't know, it's kind of risky to marry a sheriff's daughter if you're smuggling goods. So, he gets this grand idea to go from a merchant to a soldier. He works his way through the Sons of Liberty and makes his way to Massachusetts as a leader of a militia. He gets orders to take Fort Ticonderoga at the bottom of Lake Champlain. Little imagine, upstate New York, there is a lake that goes straight into Canada. The British were using it to transport goods and troops into upstate New York and have a siege. At the bottom of that is Fort Ticonderoga. With orders to take it, he marches his way up there and meets Mr. Ethan Allen, who has the same orders. However, he's from Vermont. He's quite headstrong too, though. He will not give up the commanding orders, I guess. He will not yield to paper, and he supersedes Arnold. One reason is because his army said they'd just leave if he wasn't in charge. So Arnold has to swallow his pride and go on with it. They eventually take Fort Ticonderoga, and he becomes a hero. It was a big piece of pushing back the British. So, with this, he starts to kind of grow bitter, because tragedy would strike again. His wife then dies of yellow fever. Happens a lot. But he, again, is just obsessed with succeeding. He wants to almost live for his family, be better than his father. He continues to go down this path. His ambitions lead to a very large ego. He gets the reputation of being hard to work with. He's very stubborn, and he will tell you about it. And with this reputation, he is overlooked multiple times for promotion of general. Congress at this time promotes the general. They're the people that put George Washington in charge. The other problem is that he was not very good at documenting expenses while away. So if you want a promotion, you should probably, do your job and not piss your bosses off, aka Congress. So for 2 reasons, he didn't get the job. He wasn't documenting expenses, and they just hard to work with. However, Arnold saw himself as truly the cream of the crop. He thought he was great. He thought he was everything that anyone would need it. And somebody else kind of saw that too. George Washington saw him as a bright, cunning, young leader. Needed him to further push his agenda. However, Congress did it. So he started to hold grudges and push against Congress at this point. He starts to grow bitter, and eventually he would be promoted to general underneath Horatio Gates. He'd play second fiddle once again. He would advise Horatio Gates to continually push forward and attack the British at Saratoga. Gates would not relent and would relieve Arnold of his time there. With a passionate fit, he leaves the tent. You can only imagine what he does. Mounts his horse, goes out, gains a detachment, and decisively helps the Americans win the Battle of Saratoga. Again, becoming a hero. However, he disobeyed upper orders and had to be reprimanded. George Washington places him in military command of Philadelphia. At this point, Philadelphia was a large loyalist sanctuary. There was a lot of British sympathizers here. And they started to prey upon Benedict Arnold's ambitions and grudges. Pointed at him almost like a loaded gun. Here he would square up his finances, and he would grow his own wealth while chipping away at his morals. He did shady deals, so he would, while being military command, use public transport to transport his own goods to make it a little less cheap. He would also close down stores and benefit off of closing sales, I guess, that he instigated. Here he would also meet, if it would turn, his then second wife, Margaret. He must just really have something for Margarets. Margaret Peggy Shippen, who was from a loyalist family, who would continually chip away and actively help him in treachery. She also introduced him to Major John Andre, who was a British spy and would be the main correspondence between Benedict and General Clinton of the British forces. Keep forgetting to point this way. So this leads us to West Point. Arnold continually gets more and more unsettled at being set in one place. He chips away at his own morals. He would leak potential invasions of Canada. He would give Andre information of deployments of troops, and also tell overall strategy. He was pushing down the path of treason where he really could not return. So, he resigns. He resigns from Philadelphia, and Washington wants to put him in active duty. However, in Saratoga, he caught a musket ball to the leg and said he was not fit for active duty anymore, ended his military career. So he petitioned to be placed at West Point. With a little help from his wife, who had flirted with Robert Livingston, the Chancellor of New York at the point, got the position. So he's placed at West Point, and all things go well. He plans to sell West Point over to the British to gash the Americans. Now, the important thing is that he is not against the idea of independence. He is specifically doing this out of spite and grudges, and he has been pushed down this way by people like his wife and loyalists. So, he had also already been plotting to hand over West Point before he was placed there. He had been in correspondence with Andre before even getting the position there. But once he was placed there, he would start to weaken defenses. He would divert troops, not maintain the fort, move artillery. And he would document this in a certain, I think it was 5 to 6 documents that he would eventually hand over to Andre. However, the exchange would go great until Andre tries to get back to British lines. He gets caught by revealing himself to a non-British officer as a British officer, and he eventually gets executed. However, these documents are in Arnold's hand, his handwriting, causing him to become panicked and leave. Arnold would leave his home, where he was hosting George Washington himself, to go check on things at West Point. after he heard that Andre was caught. He would saddle his horse, leave, and eventually divert and defect to British forces and serve for them. All the while leaving his wife to feign ignorance. She put on quite a theatrics and cried quite a bit, but she got away scot-free. The only person to be harmed in this is John Andre. Peggy was actually given innocence and left alone. Now, why do I call him a victim of opportunity? He had been shouldering the burden of his ambition just to make a name. He was a hero and truly wanted to be remembered. However, these ambitions can be used twofold. Again, click. Once he felt underappreciated for his actions by Congress, he would slowly chip away at what he once believed. And he would be pushed down the path of treason by the ones around him, like his wife, like John Andre, like Clinton. And they would see in more of the means to an end, like a loaded gun. Arnold made, yes, okay. The first thing is that 1A, Benedict Arnold is a traitor. He made a conscious choice against his country to commit treason. He is a traitor. However, 1B, he was assisted throughout the way. He was not able to do what he did without those people, and was used along the way to push the agenda of the British forces. That is my presentation. Is there any questions concerning at any point about Benedict Arnold?
Questions? Let's see those hands go up. Gracie, you're first. Go ahead.
Because this is an overall 15-page paper that I had to cut down to 20 minutes, so a lot of details have been pushed to the wayside for presentation's sake.
What was the overall benefit to him to going to the British side? What were they promising him?
So the original deal, he had reached out for 10,000 pounds. And eventually he had maintained contact with Clinton. He had shot him down, but once Arnold had promised West Point, he was given 20,000 pounds and a position in the British Army. He would then become a general once he changed sides and pushed into what is now the upper states. So he was promised kind of glory, the way that he couldn't get it in the American Army.
Yeah, so you mentioned that he wasn't against independence, but he seemed to be somewhat hedging his bets on the British winning the Revolutionary War. What was his game plan if the United States won and he was not found out to be a traitor?
Kind of just stick by the wayside. I mean, if the British had lost, or well, did lose, and he wasn't found out, Andre wouldn't necessarily be a problem, and he would continue to play second fiddle, I guess, to Washington then. I don't think that he would have ever wanted to give up that point. Luckily, that's not how that happened. He got found out in quite spectacular way, but no, I guess just play beyond the moonlight. Over here.
I know you talked about your smuggling businesses. What kind of things was he smuggling?
So pretty much anything that he could. Tea was the big one, but he would also smuggle gunpowder and anything useful that would be taxed. He would smuggle the medicine. It was anything to help an American gain money, I guess. So his profits.
You said that you had omitted some facts. What did you find that was maybe your favorite or the most interesting out of those facts that you may have omitted?
Oh, gosh. Trying to think of how my paper is structured here.
For instance, did he ever get back together with his wife Peggy again?
Okay, yes, he did get back with Peggy. So after he got into British control, he sent a letter back validating that she had nothing to do with it, and she was let go as innocent. She would then make her way to Canada and live with Benedict. They would raise the 3 kids and the one they had on the way, which they would later become generals and captains in the British Army, and they would happily ever after. Which isn't really true because as a traitor, he wasn't ever truly trusted by the British, because the same thing could have happened to them. He could have just flipped sides back. So the duality of traitors. That's one thing. Anything else? Yes.
I got one. Did he have any sort of like political ideology or dogma that he subscribed to, or is he just kind of more just an opportunist?
An opportunist, I think. And I think that comes from the struggle that he had throughout his childhood and early childhood, that he couldn't really develop a political ideology because he was constantly fighting for himself. So. Anyone else? Burning questions?
You kind of told us a biography. Do you want to finish the end of the story? What happens later in life? How does Arnold meet his eventual end?
He dies peacefully over in Britain. He doesn't die of yellow fever. It ends as he, like I said, his family is brought over, and his lineage is grown on through his sons, who eventually join the army. So he really doesn't get burnt by this. Andre gets burnt. He dies. He gets executed. But
But do you think Arnold died satisfied? Did he finally attain some level of peace with his choices? Did he ever have regrets? Do you think, from what you've read?
I think he died satisfied, to be honest. I don't think he would have anticipated that he would have ended where he did, by any means, being a born American, born in the colonies. I don't think he would have anticipated being underneath the crown, how he ended up like that, or with the family that he ended up with.
And how does he attain such a level of stain on his reputation? I mean, weren't there other traitors? Was he just an early traitor? Was there something more spectacular about his treason?
I think it's the stain that it really comes from is the propaganda that comes out afterwards, the amount of hate that is pulled from the public, as well as George Washington really did trust this guy. He put his faith into him, and to be so backhanded was probably something that the American public rallied around, because they rallied around George Washington so well.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Why did you specifically choose this topic?
I found that espionage was just kind of a part of American history that is not talked about, because it kind of is hard to talk about. The best espionage is not found out yet, because that's the point of it. So I thought that was an interesting point of it. So I continued down the path, and revolutionary, I guess, is more interesting to me because the ways they had to be creative about it. Whereas Snowden kind of just pulled a thumb drive, Arnold had to ride a horse around, put letters in his boots, disguises, all this. So I thought it was more fanciful and different.
All right, Connor Semin, it is my privilege and pleasure to present you with your honor cords, wear them proudly at your commencement. Well done, young man. Let's hear it for Connor Semin.